So I was thinking this week a lot about this podcast and how when I get behind this mic and I'm, behind it now, sitting in my office in my home all by my lonesome, I feel like I'm talking to a close friend. Obviously, I don't know most of you. Some of you have emailed me, but this podcast has received, I don't even know the number now, but about 1 million downloads. While it seems like I've received 1 million emails, I'm pretty sure I haven't. But I still feel like I'm talking to a close friend when I'm behind this microphone and talking about some pretty important topics, things that have a real impact on our lives. Money, investing, getting out of debt, budgeting, and it made me really think about how I start this show, because normally it sounds something like this: "This is the DoughRoller Money Podcast, episode number blah blah blah." And then I play some obnoxious intro music, and then when I end the podcast, I have some outro music at the end. And I thought, why do I do that exactly? And I guess the answer is because that's just what podcasters do, which is a pretty stupid reason to do anything. And it made me think back to an episode I recorded a while back. Many of you probably listened to it, called What If? And I encouraged folks to ask that question when it comes to our finances. What if we didn't own a car? Or what if we had one car instead of two? Or two cars instead of three? Or I don't know, three cars instead of four? What if we moved? What if you changed jobs? What if you moved closer so that you could walk to work? What if you homeschooled your kids? What if you didn't homeschool your kids? I mean, we tend to kind of get into a path in life, and I think consciously or subconsciously kind of assume that's the path we have to follow. And so I started asking a lot of what if questions this week. Sometimes we ask the question, what if? And we conclude, no, the way things are the way they should be for now. But on the podcast, I thought, what if I just hit record and I start talking? So here I am. I may go back to that music someday. I may get new music. I don't know. But today, no music. However, for those of you keeping score at home, this is episode 194. What are we going to talk about? Well, got a lot of things to cover today. The first, and sort of, I guess, the main topic of the show is I'm going to give you my thoughts on early retirement. We've covered it in the past. I interviewed Mr. Money Mustache, who retired at 30. I've interviewed others who've retired early. And I want to give you my thoughts on early retirement, kind of at a higher level, and particularly since it's something that I've been thinking about in my own life and my wife, and we've been talking about it. So that's going to be the main topic, some somewhat random thoughts on early retirement. Then we've got news you can use and some important things. We're going to be talking about some really important changes to Social Security. There was a budget deal that just passed the House. Believe it or not, it's making changes to some of your options when it comes to filing for Social Security. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a great article written by Alan Roth. I've met Alan. He wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal about investment advisors, those folks that charge you a fee to manage your investments. Sometimes you'll hear them referred to as fee-only advisors. And the question he addressed was whether a fee-only advisor can still have conflicts of interest. And he concludes they can, and it's a really important idea that he writes about. I want to talk about it a bit today. And then also going to talk about student debt and student loans, both a real-life story about someone who owes more money in student debt than you can possibly imagine, as well as a new repayment plan that's just become available for those with federal student loans. Going to cover that. Then we're going to get to your questions. I've got a number of them. I've got one about prepaid cards. I've got one about consolidating investment accounts when you near retirement, and another one about saving for college. So we've got a lot there we're going to cover. And then I'm going to try something new this month. So this is, I'm actually recording this podcast on October 29th, 2015. That's a Thursday. It's actually going to go live Sunday, which will be November 1st. So for the month of November 2015, I'm going to do something different each week. And that is, at the end of the show, I'm going to have a question of the week. And what I'm going to do is, for the first 4 people that email me the correct answer, I'm going to send you a $25 Amex gift card. I don't know, we're getting near the holidays and maybe you need a little extra spending money. But the questions are going to be designed to help you become better with your money. These are not going to be just, true, false. I mean, these questions will require a little bit of work on, I'm tired of doing all the work around here. It's time for you guys to pick up some of the slack. You just ride around in your cars, commuting to work, listening to me. Well, now it's time for you to roll up your sleeves and do a little bit of work if you want to. So, going to have a question of the week. Going to give a $25 gift card, Amazon gift card, to the first 4 people that email me with the correct answer. I am going to limit the gift cards to one for each person for the month of November. So if you win one, I'm not going to let you win another one because I want to give everyone a chance here. But you can always still continue to email me your responses. But I got a great question of the week. Well, I think it's a good one. You'll find out at the end of the episode. So I'm going to try that this month, see how it goes, see what you guys think about it. Hopefully get you guys a little more involved in the podcast. So with that, let's get started. Early retirement. So here's why this topic has come up for us. So I'm 49 years old. I just turned 49 this month, and which is big. Some people don't like birthdays when you get to my age. I love them. I can't wait to be 50. I'll be 50 next year, God willing, and I can contribute more to my 401k and IRA. I mean, what's not to love about that? Yes, my wife thinks I'm a little strange. True, but she's stuck with me for 27 years, so she kind of has already figured that out a long time ago. So I can't wait for next year, crank up that retirement savings. But my wife just kind of, I guess you would say, she retired. She was working part-time in an adoption agency, and she left there earlier this year, so she's not working now. And we start to talk about what are we going to do when we grow up? I practice law. I enjoy that, but I don't think I'm going to do that for the rest of my career, however long that is. And I really enjoy writing, on the DoughRoller blog. I enjoy putting this podcast together. I write for Forbes. I enjoy that. I write for U.S. News and others. I want to write some books. And, we just started talking, where do we want to live? Do we want to stay where we are here in Northern Virginia outside of Washington, D.C.? Do we want to move somewhere else? What do we want to do when we grow up? And it got me to thinking about early retirement. And the thought was, first of all, what exactly is it now? I mean, do we have a definition for early retirement? Traditionally, the retirement age has been 65. I guess that's still the case, although we're living longer, and certainly some people are working, much later in life. My mom is 70. And while she, quote unquote, retired from teaching, she does substitute teaching 2, 3, 4 times a week. So, is she retired? I don't know. I guess kind of not really, but she's not working full time. So is it, is it retiring before 65? Is that, the definition? How about, I think most of us would probably agree anyone retiring before 60, that would probably, if you retire in your 50s or earlier, I think that would be early retirement. I would certainly think of it that way. But then what about people that retire like my mom but work a little bit? Is she retired? What if you work 1 day a week, a couple of hours a week? Does that still qualify as retirement, or do you have to complete, is it only if you do nothing for money, then you're retired? I don't know that there is an answer to that. Certainly, I think if you stop all work before you're 60, to me, that's retiring early. Mr. Money Mustache, who retired at 30, clearly early retirement, although he runs a website and makes money from it. I don't know if he views that as still retired. I guess maybe it depends on how much time he puts into the website every week. I suppose if it's just a couple of hours, I would consider him retired. On the other hand, if he works 2 or 3 or 4 days a week on it, probably not. So I don't know what the official definition of retirement is, but for me, it's, quitting, spending very little time working, say, before you're 60. To me, that's kind of early retirement. Your definition may different, but that's sort of my idea. Certainly, if I were to retire now, I'm 49, clearly early retirement. I don't have any plans to do it. And that's really my point. And it's this: I've come to believe that this dream of early retirement is overblown. When you're working the 9 to 5 and you're commuting an hour each way, maybe you don't love your job, maybe it's okay, maybe you tolerate it. The thought of not having to do that is probably just, a dream. And certainly when you think about early retirement on your way to work in that context, yes, early retirement just sounds wonderful. But when I then think, okay, well, then what? It reminds me of a conversation I had with my boss, a litigator, trial lawyer. He could have retired years ago. I mean, he's, got a mountain of money. And, I asked him about that. He goes, yeah, what am I going to do? He likes to golf, but he says, none of my friends my age have retired. So it's not like I could go golfing during the day with my friends. They'd all be at work. And yeah, I like to golf, but am I going to golf every single day? No, that's not really for me. And, he enjoys what he does. He enjoys practicing law. And, his thought was, why, I don't want to retire. Why I kind of like what I'm doing. I'm not ready to retire. And I can't help but wonder if, the dream of early retirement is, the grass is always greener. But if you got there, maybe it wouldn't be so great. Now, that's not to say you'd like to do something other than what you're doing right now. And I think for many people, that is true. But for the folks I talk to, and this is certainly true for me, I don't want to stop doing something of value that can produce income. I enjoy it. I enjoy this podcast. Now, the podcast doesn't really create much income for me at the moment. Some of you support it. I've really not talked about that recently because I'm still haven't quite figured out how I want to monetize this podcast, but that's okay. That's fine. I enjoy doing it. But certainly the blog and the newsletter and other things generate income for me. But I love doing it. I don't want to stop doing that. And as I thought about that, I thought, I think early retirement for many is the wrong goal. Isn't the better goal financial freedom that then empowers you to do whatever you want? That to me really seems to be the right goal. Now, for some people, maybe this is Mr. Money Mustache, they really do want to stop doing anything that generates income by the time they're 30 or by the time they're 40 or by the time they're 50. I suspect, though, that a lot of people don't fit that mold. For me, the better mold is, say, Warren Buffett, who's 85, I think he's 85, still drives his Cadillac to the office every day and loves what he does. Now, he's going to obviously retire at some point, but he loves what he does for a living. He doesn't want to retire. He likes doing that. To me, that's the dream that I have. That's sort of the mold that I want to try to achieve. And to do that, I think for most people, you need some level of financial freedom. And to me, that really should be the goal, at least for many people, over this idea of early retirement of at 40, I want to just kick back and do nothing or play golf. I mean, by the way, if that's your goal, that's fine. But I think for most people, I'm not so sure how fulfilling that would really be. Of course, all of this raises the question, well, what exactly does financial freedom look like? Some define it as, ironically, the ability to retire, the ability to cover all of your expenses from, say, taking 4% of your investable assets every year. Yeah, certainly I would agree that is financial freedom, but I don't think that's the only definition of financial freedom. And as I thought about that question for me, I'll tell you how I define it, and it's this. It's two things: having no debt and having assets that would fund our lives for at least 10 years. Now, of course, that raises the question, well, what happens after 10 years? I understand that. But if you are in that kind of situation, you're not worried about how you're going to pay the mortgage, well, because you wouldn't have one, but you're not going to worry about how you're going to pay the bills next month or even next year. And it would give you the freedom to probably work just about any job you wanted to, if that was your goal, or to start a business, if that was your goal, and not to have to worry about how you were going to feed your family. And once you've achieved that financial freedom, it really puts work in an entirely different light. You begin to look for work, whatever that means for you, in ways that you don't do it when you're worried about getting the credit card payment in on time and feeding the family next month. You look for things that inspire you, and you put money kind of as a second or third or fourth factor to consider. It may not be completely unimportant, but it's not as important. And I have found that as we've my wife and I have achieved, different levels of financial freedom, and I think it's progress. Doesn't happen overnight. Work takes on a different feel. Even the same work, even the work I was doing before we had some, say, level of financial freedom, seems less onerous, less burdensome, because I know I could quit tomorrow if I want to. It's funny how that the work might be the same, but the emotional side of it, the mental side of it changes when you realize if you wanted to, you could just walk out the door. And that to me is kind of the goal that I have been trying to achieve, and I think we have financial freedom that then allows us to say, okay, what do I want to do with my life? What does my wife want to do? What do we want to do together? And we're still figuring that out. We don't have answers yet. We're talking about that now, but frankly, it's a fun conversation to have. Now, one thing to think about, you can put numbers to this. So I did, for those that have been listening to the podcast for a while, I did one on the financial freedom calculator. You may remember this, but if you're fairly new or you missed that one, it's podcast 165. If you go to DoughRoller.net/podcast 165, you'll find it. And it's a simple Google spreadsheet. You can save a copy of it. And there's a few assumptions, but based on your savings rate, it will tell you how long it would take you to achieve financial freedom as defined by enough to live on. So that's that's almost enough to retire. You could certainly scale that back and look at how long it would take you to, say, have 10 years worth of expenses, or maybe 20 years, or whatever the number is for you. But when you play with the numbers in that calculator, I think what you find is this: to achieve some level of financial freedom in a reasonable amount of time, you have to save a minimum of 20% of your gross income. And that's just, if you're saving 5%, it's going to take you, well into your 60s or 70s to save enough, certainly to save enough to retire. You just can't do it. 20% seems to be the point where the scales tip and you get enough momentum, particularly as your returns compound over time. Hopefully you're investing in low-cost investments, well-diversified, tilted towards equities. And that 20% number just seems to put you over the top. And the interesting thing about it is it's a percentage, right? So it doesn't matter if you're making $40,000 a year or $400,000 or $4 million. Doesn't matter. And if you're saving 20%, that means you're spending 80%, right? Now, some of those expenses you won't have when you quit your job, if that's what you end up doing. For example, payroll taxes, you'll no longer pay. That's like 7%. But the point is, you need that 20% savings rate or better to really get enough momentum to hit financial freedom, however you define it, in a reasonable amount of time. So I guess it's my thought of the day. I'm not looking to retire early. I'm looking to do work that I love, that inspires me, that allows me to make, my contribution in this world, such as it is. And financial freedom certainly enables me to do that, but I don't need to retire early, and I don't have any plans to retire early. I hope I'm still doing something that interests me, frankly, as long as I possibly can. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Maybe you think this is ridiculous. You want to kick back and not work another day in your life by the time you're 40 and fish or play golf or scrapbook or I don't know, whatever it is you do. Let me know. Shoot me an email, dr@DoughRoller.net. Okay, a couple of news items, and these are really important. The first one is Social Security. So, a little background. We did a podcast. I interviewed a Social Security expert in podcast 119. So again, if you go to DoughRoller.net /podcast 119, you will find it. And I'm actually pulling that up now so I can take a quick look at it. But it's podcast 119. We looked at some sort of sophisticated strategies for when and how to claim your Social Security. And it was with a gentleman named Mark Kiner, who's a Social Security expert. So it's worth listening to if you haven't. Again, DoughRoller.net /podcast 119. My takeaway from it was that the options are so complicated that when I get to the time, and I'm obviously more than a decade away, but when I get to the point of having to think about that, I'm just going to pay a consultant, and they're out there. Mark is one of them. I'm just going to pay someone, whatever it is, $300, $400, $500 to tell me what my options are and what the best way to do it. That's just how I'm going to do it. I'm not going to try to figure out all of the different options. It's just going to be much easier to pay someone, assuming, that Social Security is more or less similar to what we have now. And I think it will be. In that podcast, though, Mark and I discussed, and he explained it, and I'm not going to go back over it. You can check out the podcast. But he explained a number of different strategies. One of them was file and suspend. You can file for your Social Security benefits and then suspend them generally while you continue to work. And part of that strategy is so that your spouse can get some of those benefits. File and suspend was one of the strategies. The other one was called restricted application for spousal benefits. Now, again, I'm not going to go into great detail on those, but those were two of the strategies. I believe we talked about both of them in podcast 119. And under this new budget deal, they're going away. That's right. They're going away. So if you're in that period now where you know someone who's looking to, they're about to retire or they're about to start claiming Social Security or they're looking at some of these strategies, you need to be aware of those changes. And again, unless you're the kind of person that wants to do the detailed research on your own, that's great if you do. And by the way, if that's you and you've done all this and you've got more details, shoot me an email, dr@doughroller.net, and I'll share that with everyone. But if you're like me and you're going to rely on a consultant, now may be the time to talk to them to get an understanding of what, in detail, what these changes are. But those are two significant changes for those looking, or planning to take advantage of some of these more, unique strategies. So those are no longer going to be available. Now, again, that assumes that everything passes the way it currently stands. I think it's, as I record this podcast, it's passed the House. I think everyone expects it to pass the Senate, and everyone expects President Obama to sign it. So big changes for some of you as it relates to Social Security. Now, if you're like me and you're years away from Social Security, there's no point worrying about it. Who knows what it'll look like by the time we get there, but wanted to mention that to you. Okay, that's the first item. Second item, student debt. A couple of things there I wanted to share with you. One is the federal government's rolled out a new repayment strategy or plan for those with federal student loans. It's called REPAY, REPAYE. It's called the Revised Pay-As-You-Earn Repayment Plan. Again, it only applies to federal student loans, not private student loans. And what it does is it caps your repayments at 10% of your disposable income. That's your monthly payment. Disposable income is defined as the difference between your adjusted gross income and 150% of the poverty line. So, there's some calculations that need to be done. The government has calculators that you can check out online. But if you have federal student loans, or if maybe you're in school and you're about to get into the repayment period, or maybe maybe it's a son or daughter, a niece or nephew, a friend that definitely bring this to their attention. So it's a new repayment plan, particularly for those struggling with repayments, or they know they will be struggling with payments that are significant, very high. It might be a way to adjust down your monthly payments, though. You need to look at what it's going to do, and in terms of extending how long it's going to take you to pay off the debt and the interest you'll pay. As I say over and over again, there ain't no free lunch. So everything comes with a price. And this is no exception. You need to understand that. But I wanted to bring it to your attention. It is a new repayment option that's just come out. Now, that brings me to the second item about a young lady named Mallory Rigo. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name right, but there was an article about Mallory. I believe it was in Time, I think. And here's the deal. She graduated from a private liberal arts school, I think up in New England, with a degree in psychology. And she started into a master's program. Well, federal student loans can be deferred while you pursue a graduate degree. Private student loans, though, they can't. So the private student loans kicked in, and she was unable to finish her master's degree because she simply couldn't do that and make these payments, so she needed to stop and start working. But here's the thing. She's buried in debt. Her total debt amount, $220,000. I about fell out of my chair when I read that. Now, I have to say, to her credit, in the article, she was quoted as saying, look, I know that I'm the one that made these decisions. I'm the one that got into this mess. And I got to tell you, I give her a lot of credit for that, because, you read articles all the time about people in her situation and they want to blame the system. The system is rigged. It's the lenders, or it's the schools. And it's like, wait a minute, no one put a gun to your head and made you take out $220,000 in student loans. So I think a lot of credit goes to this young woman who I think is addressing this situation as best she can, and recognizes that, she made the decisions that put her here. But here's the thing. Particularly kids, they get out of high school, they're 18, we're all told to go to college, and they, a lot of them really need guidance on this. Some have parents that guide them, some don't. The truth be told, my parents had almost no impact on my education decisions. And I say that knowing that my mom is not going to listen to this podcast, but I would tell her that, I think. But they just didn't. And, maybe I just got lucky. I don't know. But here's the deal. Don't send a son or daughter or a friend into a liberal arts degree, or for that matter, any degree, that on the back end is going to result in $220,000 in debt. It's just insanity. And, you say, well, what's the answer? Well, how about a public school? A public school that costs $15,000 a year, and the student works, and maybe they have to get student loans, but they can pay some of it from working during the school year and working during the summer. And maybe they come out of college with a psychology degree with $20,000 in debt or $30,000 in debt, but not $220,000 in debt. It's gonna kill them financially for decades. And, to the extent that you have influence on a young person's life in a way that you can speak into their lives so they don't make Mallory's mistake. And I think, from reading that article, Mallory would be saying the exact same thing. Education is valuable. Of course it is. By the way, not all degrees are equally valuable as measured in terms of the income they generate. They may have some value outside of, say, making money. But the fact of the matter is certain degrees result in higher paying jobs than others. But even those that pay a lot, $220,000 is insane. Don't go to an expensive private school. If you can get scholarships, or I don't know, you have, a wealthy benefactor that's going to pay your way, that's one thing. But don't go into 6 figures of debt to get a degree. There's just no need to do that. Okay, I'll come down off the soapbox, but I hope, even if that's not your situation, if you can speak into the lives of a young person who's facing that decision. I hate to see kids get into that kind of debt, and come out with a degree where maybe they can get a job, but they can't come close to making the kind of money they need to pay off that debt in any reasonable amount of time. All right, last item, and a really important one. This was an article in the Wall Street Journal by Alan Roth. I've met Alan before, does some great work and in the investment space, some great articles. And he was asked a question. The question was this: Are there any conflicts of interest with fee-only advisors? It's a great question because you have those that earn a commission based on the products they sell you. That's one kind of investment professional. Those are the kind of folks that Dave Ramsey sends people to through his endorsed local provider network. And the criticism of those folks is, they're not a fiduciary. They have to put you in investments that are suitable. And that's a big debate right now, whether that'll change, but they have to put you in investments that are quote unquote suitable, but they're not a fiduciary. They don't have to have your best interests at heart. And they're selling you investments that have loads on them, that charge commissions, if you will, so that's how they get paid. And so, that's kind of questionable. There could be conflicts of interest there, right? Well, then others will say, hey, that's not me. I'm a fee-only advisor. I take a fee of your assets, say 1%, sometimes more. We've talked about fee-only advisors many, many times on the show. But I make 1%. It doesn't matter what you invest in. So it's not as if I get any more money because I put you in one fund versus another. And so there's no conflict of interest here. I'll pick whatever investments I think are best for you because it doesn't matter to me financially. Well, that has some, at least initial appeal to it. And that was the question put to Alan Roth. And he did a great job in this article, just knocked it out of the park, I think. He said, yeah, there really are some conflicts potentially. And he ticked them off. Let me tell you what he said. First one he said was, a lot of times folks will go to their advisor and say, should I take money out of my accounts and pay off my mortgage or not? Well, we've talked about that, and I don't think there's any one right answer. There's pros and cons either way, and I understand the arguments on both sides, and it's a decision we each have to make. We have to come to a decision one way or another, but what's your investment advisor's motivation here? If you take $300,000 out of your investments that you have with them to pay off your mortgage, their fee goes down. If they're getting 1% of assets, there's $3,000 a year that they lose, and the interest on it over time. So they may have an incentive to encourage you not to pay off your mortgage. Now, that doesn't mean your investment advisor is a bad person. They may very well give you their honest opinion, but we can't say that there's no inherent conflict of interest in that kind of question that you may pose to your investment advisor. That was the first example he gave. The second one, and this is actually, I think, the one that is the most problematic, and it's this. Should you roll over a 401k or a 403b or a pension into an IRA? The investment advisory community absolutely wants you to. Betterment's, and this isn't a criticism of Betterment, Wealthfront, the robo-advisors, they want you to. Why? Because that's how they make money. You take $1 million in your 401k, roll it over into an IRA at Vanguard or at Betterment or with an investment advisor. That's $1 million in assets they can get, earn fees from. If you leave it in your 401k, no, they can't help you, right? You invest pretty much on your own with a 401k. And this issue's come up before, and I want to tell you kind of a little story about this. I got an email, and I may have mentioned this. This was a while ago. But I got an email from a listener who was kind of confronted with this issue, and they had money in the TSP. That's the Thrift Savings Plan. That's the 401k for federal government workers. And they were trying to decide what to do with it. Do they roll it over to something? And they'd found some information about a company called the Postal Benefits Group. Postal Benefits Group, and from what I understand of this company, they focus on the benefits that postal workers have, thus the name of their company. And I guess postal workers invest in the TSP. And they were, as I understand it, encourage employees, or once they retire, to roll over their TSP money into something that the Postal Benefits Group calls their GC account, I think. And I don't know anything about it. I've looked on the website. I can't find anything about it. I don't know what it invests in. I don't know what its fees are. I've searched its website high and low. I've reached out to them. I've emailed them. I've gotten a response, and I've said, hey, I'm a blogger, and a listener to my podcast has emailed me about you guys. I want to understand your investment and the fees associated with it. Crickets. That's all I hear in response. Absolutely nothing. Is that a red flag for me? You bet it is. Now, I don't know. Maybe the person answering the email that day was sick and that got lost in the spam folder. But I've reached out to them. I've gotten no answer. But I have listened to some of their videos. They have like slideshows. And it was interesting. What they said was this, that the TSP is great. It is low cost. And those, if you are in it, it's like 1 or 2 or 3 basis points. I mean, it's cheaper than Vanguard. And they have 6 funds. They have the G fund, which is government bonds. I think it's called the F fund, I think, is corporate bonds. May have the letter wrong. They have a C fund, which is S&P 500. They have an S fund, which I think is small cap. I fund, which is international, and an L fund, which is like a target date retirement fund. And these things are dirt cheap. You can't find a cheaper investment. I mean, again, I could look up on the internet, but there are a couple of basis points. That's it. I mean, it is an incredible 401k. Love it. If you're in it, do a happy dance. I don't know. It is fantastic. But what these guys say in this video slideshow that I watched, it's great. It's low cost. But when it comes to retirement, there's some problems. One is the low cost comes at a cost, and that is limited options. You've only got 6 funds, limited options. They compared it to going to a wedding and getting a choice between chicken and fish. Why? Well, because they're serving a bunch of people. I'm not making this up, by the way. This was what they said in the video. Chicken or fish, because they're serving a lot of people at the wedding and they want to keep costs down, so they limit your options. And that's the same thing that the TSP does. Well, first of all, my hunch is the reason the costs are so low is because it's for the federal government and there's like $1 trillion in it. That's why the costs are low. But certainly limiting the number of funds, I'm sure, affects costs as well. But then they say, when you get to retirement, you need options. You need more options than these 6. Why? Because you want safety and you want growth. And with the TSP, you get one or the other. You only get safety or you get growth. Now, by safety, I think what they mean is low volatility. Think a bond fund. By growth, what they mean, I think, is a stock fund. Now, you may be saying, well, wait a minute, Rob, why can't you get both in a TSP? Of course you can get both in a TSP. They've got a government bond fund and they've got an S&P 500 fund. Put some in one and some in the other. You got growth and safety. So I don't know why they say you can't get both with the TSP. I also don't know why they say you can get both with their investment account, because I can't get any information about it. But I can tell you this. Warren Buffett's told his trustees that when he dies, his wife's money should be invested in an S&P 500 index fund, 90% of it, and 10% in a bond index fund. Can you do the same thing with the TSP? Absolutely. And of course, you may say, well, that's Warren Buffett. That's a little risky for me. Fine. You put 60% in the S&P 500 index fund that the TSP offers, and 40% in the G fund, and you've got a good mix, or maybe it's 50-50 for you, whatever it is. So I don't get the point, but that's what they said. The second thing they said was that you can annuitize your TSP, and which is true, you can through the government, and that's a really bad option, and that's an option that a lot of people choose, and that's really bad, and so that's just another reason. And I'm thinking, well, I don't get why that's a reason to roll over the TSP to an IRA or their fund or whatever. If annuitizing isn't right for you, don't annuitize. Simple enough. I don't know why that would be a problem. Don't annuitize. So all of that said, to me, I listened to this sales pitch, and it seems to me to be encouraging people to just pull their money out of the TSP and invest with this GC account. Now, again, it may be a great investment, and maybe it's lower cost. Maybe it's 1 basis point. Maybe it beats the cost of the I don't know. I can't find information. So if anyone has information on that, please let me know. And by the way, if anyone from the postal group, whatever it's called, let me pull up my notes again. The Postal Benefits Group, if you happen to be listening to the DoughRoller podcast right now, episode 194, shoot me an email at drdoughroller.net. Let me know what you're all about, what your fees are, what the GC account is, and I will absolutely take all that information and put it in the next episode after I hear from you. Would love to hear from you. For the rest of you, I would say this. If someone is trying to encourage you to take money out of your 401k and invest with them, before you do it, talk to someone who has no financial interest in the transaction. If you're in the TSP and someone's trying to encourage you to roll your money over into something else, particularly with heavy fees in it, talk to a bystander, not some stranger off the street, but someone that has no financial interest in your decision before you make that decision. By the way, that's not to say that rolling over your TSP money into an IRA is always a bad deal. If you wanted to roll it over to Vanguard because you wanted to keep all your assets together, and that actually is one of the listener questions we're going to get to in a minute, that's fine. Yes, Vanguard is, their funds are typically their index funds 5 basis points. Yeah, that might be a couple of basis points more than the TSP. No big deal. But if you're rolling something over into, with an investment advisor that's going to charge you 1% or more, you need to think hard and long about that. That's, you've been investing on your own in the TSP for your entire career. Why do you need help now? Why do you need to pay someone 1% now? That's something to think about. Maybe in the end you decide you do, but it's something to think about carefully. And to Alan Roth's article, that is a big conflict of interest when a fee-only investment advisor is encouraging you to take money out of a 401k or 403b and a pension and invest with them, and then they're going to start charging you whatever, 1% or more of those assets each and every year for the rest of your life. Think long and hard about that before you do it. The third thing you mentioned is complexity. It's interesting, in listening to that slideshow from that postal group, they seem to think that the simplicity of the TSP was a disadvantage in retirement. I think it's a wonderful advantage. I think it's the greatest thing. I was on Rick Edelman's site, and he has this tool where you can put in some information and it'll come up with a proposed asset allocation. I mean, it was the most complicated thing I'd ever seen. I think it was like 8% in large cap growth and 13% in large cap value and X% in small. And it was just, to my mind, crazy. Why do I need to do that? The starting point is a 3-fund portfolio. Whether it's Vanguard or not, a U.S. index fund, international index fund, bond index fund. That's the starting point. That's where you begin. Frankly, that's enough for everybody. Now, can you go beyond that? Sure, and I do. I have a little exposure to REITs, so I have a 10% in REIT funds. I get a little exposure to emerging markets. I get a little exposure to small cap value. That's fine. That's a 6-fund portfolio. You don't need 20 mutual funds. You don't need 20 individual asset classes, each with their own fund or ETF. And I don't know if this is what Rick Edelman does. I don't even know. Maybe he implements that asset plan in just a couple of funds. I have no idea. So he could. But I know that other investment advisors come up with these incredibly complicated investment plans with 10 and 15 and 20 funds and ETFs. And Alan's point is, are they doing that to justify their fee? If your investment advisor wants to charge you 2% and he or she rolls in with 3 mutual funds, you might be scratching your head and thinking, well, wait a minute, why am I paying you to put my money in 3 funds? I can do that. To which I would say, yeah, you can. Maybe you should be. The fourth item that Alan mentioned that I want to bring to your attention is this. Sometimes an investment advisor charging you, let's say 1%, can be discouraged from putting some of your money in low-yielding assets like a bond fund. Let's say maybe only earns 2%. And the reason is you're looking at that thinking, I'm earning 2% on, let's say, 20% of my money, but hey, I'm paying you 1% of it. I'm losing half my return on 20% of my portfolio, which is true right now because of the low yield, low interest rate environment we have. That can encourage some investment advisors to take on more risk than they should in your account. Now, it sounds like I'm beating up on investment advisors, and there may be some investment advisors listening to this podcast. I'm really not. What I'm really saying is this is your money. Even if you use an investment advisor, don't be passive. Make sure you know what they're doing. Make sure you know why they're doing it. Make sure you know what the fees are, and make sure you've done an assessment and decided whether those fees make sense. I mentioned the starting point is the 3-fund portfolio. Well, and when it comes to investment advisors and hiring one, the starting point is Vanguard, 30 basis points for an investment advisor. If you're paying more, you should be able to articulate why. And if you can do that, great. And maybe there's a good reason. But if you're paying more, you really need to understand why. All right, that's the news for the day. And so now on to listener questions. So the first question comes from a listener named Joe. He writes in, this is a simple one. He says, hi, Rob, can you tell me if the Serve prepaid card by Amex gives you your benefits up to 2 days early? Now, believe it or not, I've spent more time studying the prepaid card industry than I care to admit. So I thought I'd mention this. So what Joe's kind of focused on is this. If you get a paper check from your employer or a government benefits check, it obviously can take a couple of days for that check to clear your bank. Or hopefully you're not going to a check cashing store. But it can take some time for that to clear. With a prepaid card, you can sign up for direct deposit of your employer check, your paycheck, or a government benefits check, and have that direct deposit onto a prepaid card. Now, you can do, of course, the same thing at your bank. If you have a checking account, you can get direct deposit. And when you do, in my experience, the funds are available on payday. And that's generally true with prepaid cards as well, including American Express. And so, you might say, some of you might be saying, well, why would I use a prepaid card? Well, for many people, the answer is you wouldn't. You've got a checking account. Some people prefer prepaid cards for a number of reasons. Some folks can't qualify for a checking account right now because of past mistakes they've made with their bank accounts. And some people just don't want a bank account, for whatever reason. And prepaid cards have certainly become far more mainstream today than they were even 5 years ago, partly because the fees have come way down. And the benefits have gone up. American Express prepaid card, you basically get all the benefits you do with a credit card. You get things like roadside assistance, believe it or not, and purchase protection. They even have one version of their Amex card with 1% cash back, which is generally unheard of in the prepaid card space. But there are other good prepaid cards, and for the most part, the fees have come way, way down to what they were 5 or 10 years ago. So anyway, Joe, yeah, you generally can get direct deposit on at least every prepaid card that I've looked at and get your paycheck or government paycheck sooner than you would if you're just dealing with a paper check. All right, next question from Dwight. Several months ago, I started listening to your podcast and love them. You're an excellent interviewer and ask great questions of your guests. Well, thank you. My wife and I are retiring in September of next year. They're basically both around 60. Over the years, we've acquired numerous retirement accounts at multiple institutions from current and past employment. We have multiple accounts with, now listen to this, is amazing. You ready? Here's what he says. We have multiple accounts with Fidelity, Vanguard, and TD Ameritrade in a variety of forms, including a taxable brokerage, 2 401As, 401k, 2 403Bs, 2 457Bs, Keogh profit sharing, Keogh money purchases, 2 IRAs, 2 Roths, a core plan, account-based retirement plan, often called a cash balance plan, and a health savings account. Unbelievable. Anyway, these accounts total a lot of money. I'll just fill that in. You put the amount in there, but it's 7 figures, equally divided between my spouse and I. In the interest of simplification, I am considering consolidating as many of these accounts as possible at a single institution. Can you please discuss the advantages and disadvantages of consolidating accounts and which plans can be transferred or rolled over? Thank you for all you're doing with your podcast and website. Well, that's a great question. So let me first talk about rollovers. I'll confess I did not go through every account type that you've mentioned and investigate whether they can all be rolled over into an IRA. I think they can. Certainly, if you gave whoever you're going to thinking about transferring the money to, Vanguard, Fidelity, wherever, they can tell you. I know 401As, Ks, 403Bs, 57s, I think can all be transferred to an IRA. Defined benefit plans can, although I don't think you mentioned. That's the only one you didn't mention. You don't have a SEP IRA in there. Man, what are you doing? You're falling down. You got every account in there but that. Anyway, I'm pretty sure they can virtually all be rolled over to an IRA, but if you a phone call, we'll give you the answer to that. So that's, I guess, part of the first question. The real question, though, the heart of this is, and it kind of dovetails into Alan Ross' question about rolling over accounts and conflicts of interest with investment advisors. Should you consolidate these accounts? Now, Dwight didn't mention whether he's going to use an investment advisor, and I'll just assume he's not. I'm going to assume he's going to handle all of this on his own. Should you consolidate all this to say Fidelity or T. Rowe Price or Vanguard or wherever? And so here are my thoughts on this. First of all, I would absolutely consolidate some of them. To me, that's just way too many accounts to be keeping track of. That's number one. Number two, you can't consolidate everything into a single account, right? Because he has Roths. You can't, you've got your IRAs or your pre-tax retirement stuff. And then you've got Roth stuff. So at a minimum, you're looking at 2 accounts, right? But certainly that would be a lot better than the gajillion accounts that he has at the moment. But something to keep in mind, you don't mix your Roth and your pre-tax accounts. Those stay separate. So then that brings me to the third thing. And this is something that I think about. And some of you might think this is a little kooky. Some of you might agree completely. I worry about internet security. And I think to myself, if I have all of my assets at a single institution and that account gets hacked, now hopefully, if it literally got hacked and my money stolen, I assume the Vanguards of the world would make good, right? But I'm a little anxious about putting all of my money in with one company. So as much as I love Vanguard, right now we have our 401k at Fidelity. Now, I can't change that, obviously. That's my employer's decision. But when I do retire from the practice of law someday, I'm not so sure I'm going to rush that money over to Vanguard. Most of our money is at Vanguard, but I kind of like the idea of having 2 different institutions. And again, I may be just scared of my own shadow on this one. But I kind of like that. It gives me a little sense of security. And so I probably wouldn't literally consolidate everything into the same institution with, say, 2 accounts, one for the IRA and one for the Roth. I might split it up between 2 institutions. Now, does that make it a little more complicated? Yeah, a little bit. But, it's not that hard to manage all of that. And, certainly you'd be able to narrow, consolidate from all of these accounts. I mean, you've got probably, if I did my math, a dozen accounts. So frankly, consolidating that down certainly, I think, would be a huge advantage, at least to a point. But I actually might keep my money at 2 different institutions, just to be safe from, on the cybersecurity front. We've just heard of too many hacks now. I don't know of any. It was a recent hack involving Scottrade, but they just got some information. They didn't steal anyone's money, as far as I know. But that whole world is unknown. it's the kind of thing that the average person, myself included, doesn't really understand. And it makes me a little nervous. I got to be honest with you. So that's my response. And, if some of you think that's crazy, and you think, some of you probably think it's crazy, you should put all your money in one institution. Others of you think I'm probably crazy, I should have it in 10 different institutions. Well, anyway, either way, let me know what you guys think. But that's my response to Dwight. I would be a little anxious about putting it all with one institution. All right, last question for the day, and then we're going to get to the question of the week. But the last listener question comes from Mike. He says, "Hey, Rob, my wife and I are taking a more active role in our finances. We are reconsidering a lot of the financial moves our financial advisor put us into. We take responsibility for our actions, but we did not know any better at the time. We have our Roth money in an actively managed fund at 150 basis points. Ouch. Add the advisor's 50 basis points, and that is a tough pill to swallow. Indeed it is. That does not even include the fund costs, and add that to the fact that it performs poorly, and there is no reason to continue down that path. We are setting up an account with Vanguard as we speak. My question is about our children's 529. We have $10,000 total for both children so far saved. We live in Michigan, and our current plan is not a Michigan 529. Apparently, Michigan will give you a tax break with their plan. Needless to say, our advisors picked a Virginia plan. Over the phone, Vanguard informed us their plan is out of Nevada. So I guess my question is what to do next. How do you find a good low-cost Michigan plan we can transfer to? Thanks for all you do. This question, and I think I may have even read this question before, but this issue has come up in a number of emails, so I thought I'd cover it again briefly. The first is some states offer a tax break for a certain amount of contributions to a 529 plan. If you're in that state, or if you're in a state that does so, you're going to want, it's usually to your advantage, unless the investment options are just horrible, to use the 529 in your state to get the tax advantages. And some states have arrangements where, you can get the tax benefits even if you invest in a different state. Obviously, I can't throw out that information for all 50 states, but you just do a quick Google search for, in this case, Michigan 529 plans, and you'll come up with all the information you need. Now, if you don't live in a state that offers a tax benefit, or you, for whatever reason, don't care about the tax benefit, then you want to find one that has the best investment options. Obviously, I'm sort of partial to Vanguard, but you can go to, if you just Google Vanguard 529 plans, and they are in more than just Nevada, by the way. I mean, keep in mind that when a state sets up a 529 plan, many of them use Vanguard plans. Not all of them do, but they can. Vanguard funds. And so, you could even give Vanguard a call and get information directly from them. But to me, the starting point would be to search in your state. So for me, it'd be Virginia 529. That's what we used. And you can get that information and you can see the investments. So it takes a little bit of research, but it's not that difficult. And as I said, you could always give Vanguard a call if you wanted to. But it is important to understand that. Does your state offer a tax break? If so, what is it? And then if not, what kind of, you still might stick with your state's 529 plan if it's got good investment options and low costs. And I think some of them are getting better. And that gets us to the question of the week. So I'm pretty excited about this. I hope I get at least 4 emails with the right answer. Be embarrassed if next week I say, yeah, only one person got the answer right. Or even worse, I only got 2 email responses. I guess that's possible. You know what? If I only get 2 email responses and you both get it right, you're getting $50 Amazon cards. That's what I'll do. So here's the question of the week. It's regarding the following investment. I'm not going to give you the investment name. I'm going to give you the ticker symbol. You ready? SMCWX. SMCWX. That's the investment I want you to research. And I want you to answer 5 questions about SM. M as in, I wish I knew the military codes. My son knows them all. I don't know. C is Charlie, I know. I don't know what M is. M is in Mary, and I'm confident it's not Mary. M is in Marine. How about that? S is in ship. M is in Marine. C is in Charlie. X, I think, is X-ray, right? Anyway, SMCWX. SMCWX. That's the ticker. And I want you to answer 5 questions. Ready? Here they are. Does this investment have a sales charge? A load or commission? And if so, how much is it? That's question 1. Question 2. What's the expense ratio of this mutual fund? 3, does it invest in stocks or bonds? Now, some can invest in both, and actually this has a smidge of one, but it'll be clear. I want you to tell me, is this a stock mutual fund or a bond mutual fund? 4, what percentage of its investments are in U.S. stocks or bonds versus foreign stocks or bonds? And 5, what is its largest holding? Now, why is this the question of the week? Some of you have listened to this and said, Rob, I can answer that in 60 seconds. Others have listened to this question and said, Rob, what's an expense ratio? Okay. And some of you are like, yeah, I kind of get this. I think I can do it. It's so important to be able to get some basic information about an investment. You know, in your case, you may never care about SMCWX. That's just what we're using in this question. But for a lot of people, you know, you open up your 401k and you see 40 investment options and you're like, I don't know, what does all of this mean? You got to be able to answer some basic questions about a mutual fund. And so that's what this is designed to do. So next week, when I come back for the podcast a week later, I'll of course have a new question of the week. But for this one, I will not only give you the answers, I'll walk through how you should be able to answer all 5 of these questions in under 60 seconds. It's easy once you know how to do it. So SMCWX, I want to know what its sales charge is if it has one. I want to know what its expense ratio. I want to know if it invests in stocks or bonds. I want to know what percentage of its investments are in U.S. stocks or bonds or foreign stocks or bonds. And I want to know what its largest holding is. That last one may be a little tricky for some. Not sure. Shoot me an email, dr@doughroller.net. The first 4 people to get the answers right we'll get a $25 Amazon gift card. If I get fewer than that, someone's getting up to $100. That's how we're doing. If only one person answers this question right, you get a $100 gift card. But I'm hoping I get more than that. So that's the question of the week. And again, it's designed to help, it's homework in a way, so there you go. Well, hey, that's all I got for today. We're coming up on the hour. I hope you enjoyed the show. Hopefully it was helpful to you. As always, shoot me emails with questions or topics and with answers to the question of the week, dr@DoughRoller.net. And until next week, remember 2 things this time. 1, there ain't no music at the end of this show. And 2, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.